My fiancé left me 2 weeks after a car accident shattered my face because he didn't sign up to be a nurse. A year later, he saw my face again, on a billboard that was part of a citywide campaign I designed. The breakup happened 2 weeks after my first major surgery, a 6-hour procedure to rebuild my orbital bone with titanium plates and screws. I was home now in our loft, though it felt different, too bright, too open, like a museum where I was the damaged artifact on display. My face was a swollen, bruised mask of stitches and surgical tape. I couldn't chew solid food. Everything had to be pureed into unappetizing mush. I could barely speak clearly through my wired jaw, my words coming out slurred and strange. Mark had been increasingly distant since bringing me home. He'd moved to the guest room so I could recover without being disturbed. But I knew it was because he couldn't stand to look at me. He'd leave for work early and come home late, always with some urgent project that required his immediate attention. That Tuesday evening, he came into our bedroom where I was resting, propped up on pillows and trying to sip protein shakes through a straw. He stood at the foot of the bed like he was afraid to come closer, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, refusing to meet my eyes. "Clara," he began, his voice strangely formal, like he was delivering a prepared statement. "I can't do this." "Can't do what?" I mumbled through swollen lips, though somewhere deep down, I already knew. "This," he said, gesturing vaguely at my bandaged face, then at the pill bottles on the nightstand, the medical equipment, the reality of my recovery. "All of this. I didn't sign up to be a nurse. I fell in love with a strong, beautiful, vibrant woman, and this isn't you. This isn't the life I signed up for." My world was meticulously built, a life I curated with Mark over 3 careful years. We had the cool downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning light just right, the matching minimalist furniture we'd spent weekends hunting for in boutique stores, and a 5-year plan that was right on schedule, complete with color-coded spreadsheets and quarterly check-ins. As a senior graphic designer at Meridian Creative, one of the most competitive agencies in the city, I was thriving. My portfolio was growing, my clients loved me, and I'd just been shortlisted for a prestigious industry award. Mark was a rising star in finance, the kind of guy who wore tailored suits and spoke confidently about market trends at dinner parties. We were the couple our friends pointed to when they talked about relationship goals. Sarah would joke that we were like something out of a magazine spread. "Perfect Clara and perfect Mark," she'd say with a mix of admiration and gentle teasing. The stakes for me weren't just about our relationship. They were about that shared vision of the future we'd painted in such vivid detail. Wedding venue already booked for next spring, honeymoon in Tuscany planned down to the restaurant reservations, names picked out for future children. My identity was completely intertwined with my creativity, my drive, and the life I was so proud to be building with the man I was going to marry. Mark loved the beautiful life we had constructed together. He loved hosting dinner parties where everything was perfect. The wine properly aerated, the playlist carefully curated, every detail Instagram ready. He loved that I was ambitious and independent, that I could hold my own in conversations about art and design, that other men looked at him with envy when I walked into a room. He loved introducing me as his brilliant fiancé, the creative genius. He loved me, but I would come to learn that his love was conditional, built on a foundation as fragile as spun glass. It was a fair-weather investment, profitable only when the market was up. I remember once having a terrible bout of the flu that knocked me out for a week. Instead of the nurturing partner I expected, Mark was just annoyed. He complained about the house being messy, how my coughing was keeping him up, how we'd had to cancel plans with his boss. "I just need you to get better faster," he'd said, standing in the doorway of our bedroom like he was afraid to get too close. At the time, I chalked it up to work stress and his fear of getting sick before a big presentation. Now, I see it was a preview of coming attractions, a glimpse of who he really was when the going got tough. It happened on a rainy Tuesday in October, the kind of dreary day where the city looked washed out and gray. I was driving home from a client meeting that had gone phenomenally well. They'd approved my campaign concept on the spot, something that almost never happened. I was actually humming along to the radio, mentally planning how I'd tell Mark about the victory over dinner. I stopped at a red light on 5th Avenue, checking my phone for his response to my earlier text about picking up Thai food. The last thing I remember clearly was the sound of screeching tires, metal grinding against metal, and then a moment of perfect, terrifying silence before the world exploded. A drunk driver had run the red light doing 50 in a 30 zone. The impact was so violent that my car spun twice before slamming into a light pole. I woke up in the hospital to a world of pain and confusion that no amount of morphine could fully dull. The fluorescent lights felt like daggers in my skull. Every breath hurt. When I tried to speak, only garbled sounds came out. The doctors were kind but direct in that way medical professionals master. Compassionate but clinical. Dr. Martinez, the emergency surgeon, had hands that moved gently despite delivering devastating news. "Clara, you've suffered multiple severe facial fractures," he explained, his words floating through the fog of painkillers. "Your left orbital bone is shattered, there's significant damage to your jaw, and extensive tissue trauma. We'll need to perform several reconstructive surgeries over the coming months. The road to recovery will be long and difficult, but I want you to know, we're going to do everything we can to help you heal." Lying in that hospital bed, tubes and wires snaking around me like technological vines, I was terrified. Not just of the physical pain, which came in waves so intense they made me nauseous, but of the future. My face had always been part of my identity. Not because I was vain, but because it was the face that smiled at clients, that conveyed confidence in presentations, that Mark kissed every morning before work. Now, hidden beneath layers of bandages, I felt like my very self had been stolen. This can't be real. This isn't happening to me. This is someone else's nightmare. But through the fog of morphine and fear, one thought was a solid, comforting anchor. Mark. We will get through this. He's my rock. He'll be here. I clung to that belief like it was a life raft in a storm. He'd proposed just 6 months earlier with a speech about loving me through everything life could throw at us. This was our test, and we'd emerge stronger. For the first few days, Mark played the part of the devoted fiancé with theatrical precision. He brought flowers, bright yellow roses that clashed horribly with the sterile hospital room, because he'd forgotten that I loved peonies. He held my bandaged hand, though his touch felt hesitant, like he was afraid I might be contagious. He fielded phone calls from concerned family members and friends, his voice a perfect performance of a worried partner saying all the right things. Yes, she's stable now. The doctors are optimistic. We're just taking it one day at a time. But the cracks in his facade started to show almost immediately, hairline fractures that would soon become gaping chasms. He'd complain about the cost of hospital parking. $12 an hour, can you believe that? Like it was somehow my fault for being there. He'd spend most of his visits scrolling through his phone, sighing heavily whenever a nurse came in to check my vitals or adjust my four. I could see him stealing glances at his watch, calculating how long he needed to stay to seem appropriately concerned. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at a problem he had to manage, an inconvenience that had disrupted his perfectly planned life. When I tried to talk about my fears about the upcoming surgeries, he'd change the subject to work stress or suggest I try to sleep more. The doctors know what they're doing, he'd say with finality, as if that solved everything. He's just stressed, I told myself during the long, dark hours when pain kept me awake. This is a lot for him, too. He didn't sign up for this any more than I did. But a cold knot of dread was forming in my stomach, growing larger each day as I watched the man I loved transform into a stranger. My sister Jenna flew in from Portland the day after the accident. The contrast was immediate and heartbreaking. Where Mark hesitated, she dove in headfirst. She asked the doctors detailed questions, took notes, demanded to understand every aspect of my care. She brought me soft pajamas from home, lip balm for my cracked lips, and books on tape because reading made my head throb. She didn't flinch when she saw my face for the first time without bandages. You're still my beautiful little sister, she said simply, squeezing my hand. Just a little banged up. The difference in their reactions was like comparing sunlight to shadow. The breakup happened 2 weeks after my first major surgery, a 6-hour procedure to rebuild my orbital bone with titanium plates and screws. I was home now in our loft, though it felt different, too bright, too open, like a museum where I was the damaged artifact on display. My face was a swollen, bruised mask of stitches and surgical tape. I couldn't chew solid food. Everything had to be pureed into unappetizing mush. I could barely speak clearly through my wired jaw, my words coming out slurred and strange. Mark had been increasingly distant since bringing me home. He'd moved to the guest room, so I could recover without being disturbed. But I knew it was because he couldn't stand to look at me. He'd leave for work early and come home late, always with some urgent project that required his immediate attention. That Tuesday evening, he came into our bedroom where I was resting, propped up on pillows and trying to sip protein shakes through a straw. He stood at the foot of the bed like he was afraid to come closer, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, refusing to meet my eyes. Clara, he began, his voice strangely formal, like he was delivering a prepared statement. I can't do this. Can't do what? I mumbled through swollen lips, though somewhere deep down, I already knew. This, he said, gesturing vaguely at my bandaged face, then at the pill bottles on the nightstand, the medical equipment, the reality of my recovery. All of this. I didn't sign up to be a nurse. I fell in love with a strong, beautiful, vibrant woman. And this isn't you. This isn't the life I signed up for. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, my heart turning to a block of ice in my chest. He was breaking up with me. Not because of anything I'd done, not because our relationship had deteriorated, but because my recovery was an inconvenience to him. Because loving me had become work. Is he serious? Is this a joke? The disbelief was actually more intense than any of my physical injuries. This was the man who'd gotten down on one knee in the restaurant where we'd had our first date, who'd promised to love me in sickness and health even though we weren't married yet. This was the man who'd held me while I cried happy tears over the positive pregnancy test we'd lost 3 months before the accident. A miscarriage he'd helped me through with what I'd thought was genuine love and support. Mark, I tried to say, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. I'm still me. This is temporary. The doctor said. I can't wait around to find out, he cut me off. I have to think about my own future, my own mental health. This situation, it's dragging me down. I'm sorry, but I need to move on. He took the engagement ring I couldn't wear because of my swollen hand from the nightstand, a ring that had cost him 3 months' salary, he'd proudly told everyone, and placed it on the dresser with a small, final clink. Then he walked out without another word. He didn't even say goodbye. He didn't promise to check on me. He didn't ask if I'd be okay alone. That was it. 3 years together, erased in less than 5 minutes. Mark didn't just leave. He vanished like I'd been a bad dream he was desperate to forget. He blocked my number so thoroughly that my calls went straight to a generic voicemail. He unfriended me on all social media, removed every trace of our relationship from his digital footprint as efficiently as he'd once organized his investment portfolio. He sent our mutual friend Tom over the next day to pack up his things, like a coward who couldn't even face his own mess. He says he's sorry, Tom mumbled, unable to look me in the eye as he shoved Mark's clothes into garbage bags. He says he hopes you understand. Tom had been the best man at 3 weddings in our friend group. He'd given a toast at our engagement party about how Mark and I were proof that true love still exists. Now he stood in my living room, shoving evidence of that love into trash bags like it was contaminated waste. My world hadn't just shattered. It had been swept away by someone I'd trusted to help me rebuild it. The loft felt cavernous and empty. Half the furniture was gone, leaving behind clean rectangles on the hardwood floor like evidence of a crime. The matching dishes we'd registered for were split down the middle. He'd even taken the coffee maker we'd bought together in Italy. Later, I heard through the grapevine, because in a city like ours, news travels fast through interconnected social circles, that Mark was telling his version of the story to anyone who'd listen. According to him, the accident had changed me completely, made me depressed and negative, and he'd had to leave for his own mental health and well-being. He painted himself as the victim of my transformation, a man who'd tried his best, but finally had to cut his losses. Sarah called me crying after running into him at a mutual friend's housewarming party. "Clara, I'm so sorry. He's telling people you became impossible to live with, that you pushed him away." I told him he was full of shit, but he wasn't just abandoning me. He was trying to rewrite our entire history to make himself the hero of his own narrative. In his version, I was the villain of my own tragedy, the difficult patient who'd made his life unbearable. It was a masterclass in gaslighting from beyond the grave of our relationship. My recovery became a full-time job, and the hardest one I'd ever had. There were the follow-up surgeries. For over 6 months, each one requiring weeks of healing. There was the excruciating physical therapy to regain movement in my jaw, exercises that made me feel like my face was being rebuilt from the inside out. There were the medications that made me foggy and nauseous, the sleepless nights when phantom pain would wake me from dreams where my face was still whole. But the worst part was the mirror. For months, I couldn't stand to look at my own reflection. The swelling, the scars, the asymmetry, it was like looking at a stranger who'd stolen my life. Every glance was a fresh reminder of the trauma and the betrayal. Who is that? Is that me? Will I ever be me again? The woman in the mirror had scars that ran from her left temple down to her jaw. Her smile was crooked. One eye sat slightly higher than the other. She looked tired, older, like she'd survived something terrible. Because she had. I developed elaborate routines to avoid mirrors. I brushed my teeth looking down at the sink. I covered the bedroom mirror with a sheet. I did my physical therapy exercises with my eyes closed. The system I was fighting wasn't just my injuries, it was my own mind, trying to claw my way back from a pit of despair so deep I couldn't see the light. But I was not alone, even though it felt like it in those darkest moments. My true support system materialized like guardian angels I hadn't known I needed. Jenna was on a plane the day after Mark left, her boyfriend Kevin managing things at her graphic design studio in Portland while she camped out in my spare room for a month. She didn't offer empty platitudes or false optimism. She just showed up, day after day, changing my bandages with the efficiency of a trained nurse, pureeing my food into combinations that were actually edible, and bullying me into doing my physical therapy exercises when all I wanted to do was hide under the covers. 10 more jaw stretches, she'd command, standing over me with crossed arms. I don't care if it hurts. The only way out is through. She was my drill sergeant and my lifeline, the person who held me together when I was convinced I was falling apart forever. She let me cry without judgment, but she also wouldn't let me wallow. When I'd been home for 2 weeks and hadn't showered, she literally dragged me to the bathroom and threatened to hose me down herself. Dr. Anya Sharma, my reconstructive surgeon, became another pillar of strength. She was a brilliant artist with a scalpel, a woman who approached faces like sculptures and saw possibility where I saw only damage. But more than that, she was brutally honest in a way that somehow felt like kindness. "This will be hard," she told me before my second surgery, her dark eyes serious but warm. "The scars on the outside will fade much faster than the ones on the inside. People are going to stare. Some will look away. Others will ask intrusive questions. Your job is to focus on getting strong. Let me worry about making you beautiful again." She never lied to me about timelines or outcomes. She never promised miracles. But she also never let me give up hope. During one particularly dark appointment, when I'd asked if I'd ever look normal again, she'd pulled out before and after photos of other patients. "Define normal," she said. "These are all women who were told they'd never be the same. Look at them now." The photos showed scars, yes, but also smiles. Life. Beauty that was different, but no less real than what came before. My boss, David, was another unexpected hero. I was sure I was going to lose my job. I couldn't come into the office looking the way I did. Our clients expected polished perfection, and I looked, frankly, terrifying. I called him from my hospital bed, ready to resign before he could fire me. He cut me off mid-sentence. "Clara," he said, his voice firm but gentle, Your talent isn't in your face, it's in your brain and your hands. We'll set you up to work from home. Take all the time you need. Your job is waiting for you. He didn't just save my job. He saved a piece of my identity when everything else felt lost. The lowest point came about 3 months into my recovery. Jenna had gone back to Portland, confident I was stable enough to manage on my own. I was alone in the loft that now felt cavernously empty without Mark's presence and Jenna's constant companionship. The silence was deafening. I was trying to open a jar of applesauce, the only food I could manage that day, and my hands were still too weak, still shaky from the medications. The jar slipped from my fingers and shattered on the kitchen floor, applesauce and glass spreading across the white tiles like abstract art. I just slid down the kitchen cabinets and sat on the cold tile, surrounded by broken glass and mess, and I sobbed. Not the careful, quiet crying I'd been doing for months, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I felt utterly helpless, ugly, and abandoned. Mark was right, I thought, looking at the framed photo of us on the counter. The happy, perfect couple at last year's company Christmas party, both of us glowing with success and love and the certainty of our future together. The woman he fell in love with is gone. She's dead, and this broken thing is all that's left. In that moment, surrounded by the debris of my simple failure, I almost believed him. Almost let his version of the story become my truth. But something in me rebelled against that narrative. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the faint echo of the strong woman I'd once been. But as I sat there in the mess, I felt a tiny spark of anger. Fuck him. Fuck his version of who I am. Fuck his cowardice and his shallow love and his rewritten history. It was the first time I'd felt anything other than sadness and fear in months. It was the beginning of my real recovery. The confrontation wasn't with Mark. It was with myself, in the mirror I'd been avoiding for months. About 6 months after the accident, the swelling was mostly gone. The scars were still red and raised, but for the first time, I could see glimpses of my old face underneath the damage. But I saw something new too. A strength in my eyes that wasn't there before. A quiet fury that belonged entirely to me. I am so fucking tired of this, I thought, staring at my reflection with clear eyes for the first time since the accident. I was tired of being a victim. I was tired of feeling sorry for myself. I was tired of letting Mark's abandonment define my worth. I was tired of hiding. That day I called David. I'm ready, I told him, my voice clearer than it had been in months. Give me a project. Give me the hardest one you've got. Clara, are you sure? There's no rush. I'm sure. I'm ready to work. He assigned me the lead on a massive rebranding campaign for First Metropolitan Bank, one of the city's oldest financial institutions trying to modernize their image. It was our biggest client, worth more than $500,000 in billings. The old me would have been intimidated by the scope and the pressure. The new me was hungry for it. I poured every ounce of my pain, my anger, and my newfound resilience into that project. I worked from my loft for months, creating mood boards, designing logos, crafting campaigns that spoke to reinvention and second chances. My talent, sharpened by trauma like steel forged in fire, became my secret weapon. I wasn't just designing a campaign. I was rebuilding myself pixel by pixel. The client presentations were done via video conference, and I was strategic about camera angles and lighting. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't ready to make my scars part of the story yet. That would come later. The campaign was a monumental success that exceeded everyone's expectations. The client was ecstatic, praising the raw emotional authenticity of the work. The tagline I'd created, your city, your bank, your future, became the cornerstone of a campaign that would run for 2 years. David promoted me to creative director, a title that came with a substantial raise and my own team. This is the best work you've ever done, he told me during my promotion meeting. There's a depth to it, an honesty that's, I don't know how to describe it. It's like you found something in yourself that wasn't there before. He was right. The accident hadn't just changed my face. It had revealed parts of my talent and strength I'd never accessed before. Pain had become fuel. Survival had become art. With my new salary and a surge of confidence, I broke the lease on the loft I'd shared with Mark. Every room held memories of him, of our shared plans, of the person I'd been before. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in a converted warehouse across town. Exposed brick, huge windows, a space that was entirely mine. I started freelancing on the side, taking on passion projects for nonprofits and small businesses. My reputation grew. Word spread about the creative director, who'd survived something terrible, and emerged with a voice that could capture authentic human experience. My physical recovery was almost complete. The scars had faded to thin, silver lines that caught the light like jewelry. They were no longer signs of damage, but marks of survival. Dr. Sharma had been right. I was beautiful again, just different. The asymmetry that had horrified me in those early months now gave my face character distinction. I looked like someone with a story worth telling. The final phase of the bank campaign involved billboards all over the city, downtown, near the university, in the hip neighborhoods where young professionals lived and worked. The concept I had designed was a series of powerful portraits of diverse people living their best lives, with our tagline, your city, your bank, your future, running beneath each image. For one of the billboards, the client had a request. They'd seen my photo from the company website and wanted to use a stylized portrait of me as part of the campaign. You embody the spirit of reinvention we're trying to capture. The the client said during a conference call. Would you consider being part of your own creation? I was hesitant at first. My scars were barely visible in professional headshots, but a billboard would be different. Larger. More exposed. But then I realized this was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been unconsciously working toward. This was my chance to control the narrative, to show the world the woman I'd become. The photo shoot was transformative. The photographer, Maria Santos, was a master at capturing authentic emotion. She had me talk about my work, my dreams, my journey while she shot. Don't pose, she kept saying. Just be. The final image was striking. Me in profile, the light catching the silver line of my largest scar, my eyes bright with confidence and possibility. I looked strong, beautiful, and utterly unbroken. When the billboard went up on Fifth Avenue, ironically just 2 blocks from where the accident had happened, I stood on the sidewalk and stared up at myself, 30 feet tall and radiating power. This is who I am now, I thought. This is who I've always been, underneath everything. A month after the billboard campaign launched, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just my name, Clara. My heart stopped for a moment before I opened it, some instinct warning me that my peaceful new life was about to be disrupted. It was from Mark. Clara. I saw the billboard on Fifth Avenue. Wow, you look amazing. Stunning, actually. I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year, a lot of soul-searching. I was a coward. I made the biggest mistake of my life walking away from you. I was scared and immature, and I handled everything wrong. I've been in therapy working on myself. I realize now that I abandoned you when you needed me most, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I've grown so much since then. I'd love to see you, to talk, to apologize properly, and maybe see if there's any chance for us to start over. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm hoping you might give me a chance to prove I'm different now. That I can be the man you deserved all along. Love, Mark. P.S. Congratulations on your success. You always were the most talented person I knew. My blood ran cold as I read it, then warmed with a steady, righteous anger. He saw my success, not me. He saw the billboard, the promotion, the evidence of my professional triumph, and suddenly I was worth wanting again. The timing wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't about love or growth or genuine remorse. This was about Mark wanting to be associated with my success, wanting to be part of the story now that it had a happy ending. I agreed to meet him for coffee, but not for him. For me. I needed to close this book properly, to face the ghost that had haunted my recovery and show myself that he no longer had any power over me. I chose the coffee shop carefully, neutral territory, public, with enough ambient noise that we wouldn't be overheard. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple black dress that made me feel powerful and put together. My hair was styled to show off my profile, scars and all. I wanted him to see exactly who I'd become. He was already there when I arrived, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen before. He'd always been confident to the point of arrogance, but now he seemed diminished somehow. He stood up when he saw me, his eyes immediately scanning my face, searching for the damage, for the broken woman he'd left behind. He couldn't find her, and his confusion was visible. Clara, he said, his voice softer than I remembered. You look incredible. I sat down across from him, ordered my coffee with easy confidence, and waited. He launched into what was clearly a prepared speech, hitting all the expected notes. How lost he'd been, how therapy had opened his eyes, how he wasn't mature enough to handle the situation back then. He talked about seeing the billboard, about realizing what he'd lost, about how much he'd grown in the past year. I know I hurt you, he said, leaning forward earnestly. I know I was selfish and cowardly, but I'm different now. I'm ready to be the partner you deserved. If you'll give me a chance, I promise I'll never let you down again. It was a polished performance, hitting every emotional beat calculated to make me forgive him. The old Clara might have been moved by it, might have been tempted by the fantasy of our perfect life restored. But the woman sitting across from him had been forged in fire. She could see through his performance to the calculating opportunist beneath. When he was done, I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. The silence stretched between us, and I watched him squirm in it. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm and clear. Thank you for saying all of that, Mark. I can see you've put a lot of thought into this conversation. He nodded eagerly, probably thinking he'd succeeded in whatever game he thought we were playing. But I need you to understand something, I continued. The woman you left in that hospital bed, the woman you abandoned when she was broken and afraid, she doesn't exist anymore. You were right about that. She's gone. His face fell slightly, confusion replacing hope. And the woman I am today, the woman who survived everything you put her through, who rebuilt herself from nothing, who learned that she was strong enough to face anything alone, she would never, ever be with someone like you. The words came out without anger or bitterness. They were simply facts, delivered with the clarity of absolute certainty. You see, Mark, leaving me wasn't the cruelest thing you did. The cruelest thing was making me believe that I was only worth loving when I was convenient, that my value was tied to how easy I was to be with. It took me months to unlearn that lie. I leaned back in my chair, completely at ease while he sat frozen across from me. In a strange way, abandoning me was the most valuable gift you ever gave me. It revealed a strength in me I never knew I had. It showed me what real love looks like, and what it isn't. So thank you for that. I stood up, placed a $5 bill on the table for my coffee, and looked down at him one last time. Goodbye, Mark. As I walked away, I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn around. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage. The door I'd been afraid to close for so long slammed shut behind me with a satisfying finality. The victory wasn't in seeing his stunned, defeated face, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in it. The real victory was in the lightness I felt walking out of that coffee shop and back into my own beautiful, resilient life. For the first time since the accident, I felt completely free, not just from Mark, but from the woman I'd been before. The woman who'd needed his approval, who'd built her identity around being part of a perfect couple, who'd been afraid to take up space on her own. I went home and blocked his email address, changed my number, made sure there were no more pathways for him to reach me. The final door was closed, locked and bolted. There were no more ghosts haunting my new life. A few of our mutual friends who had initially sided with him, or at least remained neutral, eventually tried to creep back into my life with sheepish apologies. Sarah had stayed loyal throughout, but others like Tom and Jessica reached out months later with awkward messages about how they'd always known Mark was wrong, and how amazing I looked now. I politely but firmly kept my distance. My circle was smaller now, but it was made of solid gold. It's been 2 years since the accident, 3 since Mark walked out of my life. Last year, I left Meridian Creative and started my own agency, Resilient Design. The name wasn't subtle, but it didn't need to be. My first client was a nonprofit that worked with domestic violence survivors, women who needed to rebuild their lives and their sense of self-worth. The campaign I created for them, Unbroken, won 3 industry awards and led to a waiting list of clients who specifically sought out my work. My apartment has become a sanctuary filled with art from local galleries, plants that thrive in the huge windows, and the quiet satisfaction of a life built entirely by my own hands. I host dinner parties now, not the performative perfection Mark had demanded, but messy, joyful gatherings where friends feel comfortable enough to curl up on my couch and stay until midnight. I'm dating someone new, a kind architect named David who I met at a gallery opening 6 months ago. He has gentle hands and laughs at my terrible jokes. The first time he traced my largest scar with his thumb, I tensed, waiting for him to ask about it or look away. Instead, he smiled and said, "This is my favorite part of your face. It shows how strong you are." We've been taking things slowly, both of us careful with the tender parts of ourselves. But there's something different about this relationship, something I never had with Mark. David loves me not despite my scars, but including them. He sees my complete story as beautiful, not just the easy parts. My life isn't just back to normal. It's fuller, more authentic, and built on a foundation of unbreakable strength. I know who I am now in a way I never did before. I know what I can survive, what I can build, what I deserve. The car crash was the worst day of my life, but Mark leaving me turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. He didn't break me. He set me free. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that moment in the coffee shop when Mark realized he'd lost something he could never get back. Not just me, but the version of me that would have taken him back, that would have been grateful for his return, that would have settled for conditional love dressed up as devotion. That woman is gone, and I'm glad. In her place stands someone I'm proud to be. A woman with scars that tell stories of survival, eyes that have seen the worst and still choose to look for beauty, hands that create something meaningful from the raw material of pain. I built this life myself from the ground up, with no blueprint except my own stubborn refusal to let trauma define me. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever created.